Welcome to the Riverwood Conservancy's webinar series. Today our presentation is a long-awaited presentation, Birdability, because birding is for everybody and everybody, with Freya Mcgregor. As always, my name is Stephanie Keeler. I'm the Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy. Thank you everyone for joining once again. I want to say a special thanks to Credit Valley Conservation for supporting the community program work that we do. I also want to mention that our February programs are now on our website at the riverwoodconservancy.org/events. There you can register for any in-person and virtual programs. Anything in yellow you see on your screen right now is virtual, and anything in green is in-person. The in-person programs are filling up quite quickly, so please check out our website if you haven't already. And the Riverwood Conservancy is a charity organization. We appreciate all types of support for our programs, including participation, membership, donations, and even volunteering. So thank you everyone for your support this past couple of years. And before we get to our presentation today, the Riverwood Conservancy would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. Today, this place is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and we are very, very grateful to have the opportunity to not only live, but work on this land. And today we have Freya Mcgregor coming with us today, who is the Birdability Coordinator and Occupational Therapist. Birding since childhood, her dodgy knee often creates an accessibility challenge for her. With a background in blindness and low vision services, she is passionate about enabling all birders and potential future birders to enjoy birding and nature as much as she does. So welcome so much, Freya. Thank you for joining us today. I will hand it over to you. And if anyone has questions on Facebook or Zoom for Freya, you can comment down below.
Hi, everyone. My name's Freya Mcgregor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to talking with you all today. If you're in the Zoom webinar, I would love to, if you wanted to introduce yourselves in the chat, maybe share if you're comfortable where you're from, and if you have a disability or another health concern, if you would like to share about that. I'd especially love to hear your or read your comments and reflections and so on throughout this presentation. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, no worries at all, no pressure of any kind. I will try and keep track of the chat throughout. So I'm coming to you from the lands of the Muskogee Creek people, now known as Alabama. And the Muskogee people have been living and birding on this land for thousands of years, and I'm very grateful to be able to do the same in this part of the world. So I'm going to share my screen and jump straight in. So as Stephanie said, I'm the Birdability Coordinator and Occupational Therapist. Birdability, we're a brand new nonprofit. We're just a year old, and we're based in the US, but you might be able to tell I'm not actually from the US. I'm from Australia, so it's really fun to be chatting with you all in Canada. And I believe that our work applies wherever there are birds and people. It's not specific to the US, although we are based in the US. So what do you see in this photo? Now, if you haven't got your screen on, if you are blind or have low vision or otherwise can't see, I will be reading aloud or describing aloud everything that comes on the screen. So please don't worry about missing out on visual information. But for those who can see, what do you see in this photo? I see 6 people out on a trail. The trail looks like it might be an accessible trail. It's wide and flat and it's concrete. That's a good start. They're outside in nature. There's a tree behind them and some big tall reeds. 5 of the people are in manual wheelchairs. 2 of those are more kind of ruggedy outdoor looking wheelchairs. The 2 on the right, there's a 3rd wheel and there's a few other adaptations to those wheelchairs. Everyone has binoculars, which might indicate they're looking for birds, although of course you don't need binoculars to enjoy birds. And there's 1 standing person. It's definitely worth noting that not every disability is visible. And you can't always tell if someone has access needs or not just by looking at them. But I really like this photo. It's a good, fun photo. It was taken in Tucson in Arizona on an Tucson Audubon and Southeast Arizona adaptive sports bird outing. Lots of cool ways to connect to the disability community and the birding community and the outdoor community. And that's one of them. So what do we know? Why is this work important? Well, we know that time spent in nature is good for us. There's a growing body of evidence to support this. We know that spending time in nature can decrease our levels of stress, and it can increase our feelings of confidence and attentional capacity, which is how much like brain space you have to focus on a task or tasks ahead of you. And a lot of people just know this kind of intuitively, that if they're stressed or if they've had a really big week, it's really nice to go hang out by a lake or in the woods or something. I know that birds can be the gateway to spending time in nature. They have all colors on their plumage. They make all kinds of weird and cool sounds, and they can fly. I mean, how cool is that? So for a lot of people, birds can be the reason that they spend time in nature and get all those health and wellness benefits from doing so. We know that birding is the fastest growing leisure activity in the US. I wouldn't be surprised if the same was true in Canada. I mean, this statistic is 22 years old now, but in 2000, 85 million Americans said they enjoyed engaging with birds in a leisure capacity. And that number's grown significantly in the last 2 years, where people have spent a lot more time at home, maybe feeling trapped, watching out their windows, seeing what they can see, and seeing those things that can fly and may represent freedom. We know there's little bits of data here and there that show us that a lot more people have started engaging with birds around the world in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. We know that birding has the potential to be inclusive and accessible, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. But there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done for it to really be as inclusive and accessible as it can be. And again, sorry, this is American based, but these stats are pretty universal. 1 in 4 Americans, says the US Census Bureau, has a disability. If anyone wanted to Google the statistics in Canada, I'd love to hear them, but they're pretty close to that in Australia. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are in Canada too. 1 in 4 in the US. Anyway, that's a lot of people. The only minority. You can join at any time. 20 million have a mobility challenge, difficulty walking or are unable to walk, and 7 million are blind or have low vision. Lots of people. We're not talking about a small group of people here. And as I mentioned, this is about our future selves. You never know. My dodgy knee, it happened overnight. The next morning for some reason, I couldn't straighten my leg, and my plans of hiking up the White Mountains in New Hampshire that summer were dashed. It's a lot better now. I still wouldn't hike up a White Mountain, but you never know when a new diagnosis or health condition might come up and it affects you or someone really close to you. And if you want to be outside birding, well, this conversation is about everybody, not just about a group of people that you might not think you're part of. It's important to keep that in mind. So, Birdability. Through education, outreach and advocacy, Birdability works to ensure the birding community and the outdoors are welcoming, inclusive, safe and accessible for everybody. We focus on people with mobility challenges, blindness or low vision, chronic illness, intellectual or developmental disabilities. That includes things like Down syndrome and autism, mental illness, and those who are neurodivergent, deaf or hard of hearing, or who have other health concerns. But inherently, our work can have positive impacts for people like parents with strollers. That's a mobility challenge. Grandparents with toddlers, older people who are just slowing down because they're getting older, people with new medical diagnoses, folks with dodgy knees. Again, this is about our future selves. In addition to current birders, we strive to introduce birding to people with disabilities and other health concerns who are not yet birders, so they too can experience the joys of birding. There are lots of different places we can find these people. This list is not exhaustive at all, but we can tap into local disability support groups. There's often groups for people who have spinal cord injuries or amputations or multiple sclerosis, or who survived a stroke. Veterans, my husband's a combat veteran. Bird festivals, there's loads of them. kids disabled camps, centres for independent living, schools for the deaf, schools for the blind, rehabilitation hospitals, Easter seals, assisted living centres, and scouting and 4-H groups. I'm not sure if 4-H is in Canada. It's like a school-based community group, sort of like Scouts, but it's around like agricultural skills and farming and that sort of stuff. Really cool. So both, you know, girl or boy Scouts or guides. In Australia we have Girl Guides. Have a service component, and so these groups could be involved in, you know, helping increase the accessibility of trails and things like that. I should mention Rehab Hospitals. I'm an occupational therapist, a healthcare provider, all about trying to enable people to do things in their everyday life that they're having difficulty doing because of a disability, injury, or illness. Usually it's things like driving a car or cooking dinner. In my case, it's birding. And there's so much potential for occupational therapists, for physical therapists, for recreational therapists to include birding in their therapy programs in rehab hospitals and all kinds of other healthcare settings. It's really cool. So the best we can be is waiting for us in nature. Interesting idea. So says Virginia Rose, who I'm about to sort of virtually introduce you to. If this is true, shouldn't everybody have the opportunity to find their best selves? So Virginia is the founder and president of Vertability. She's a retired high school English teacher who lives in Texas, and she's been birding for 17 years. When she was 14 years old, she had a horse riding accident, which caused a T10 spinal cord injury. That's the level of the spinal cord that was injured. So below that, the messages aren't getting through the big nerve that is the spinal cord. And as a result, she cannot move or feel her legs. So she uses a manual wheelchair to get around. When she first started birding, she came across a lot of difficulties. If you're a manual wheelchair user or a power wheelchair user, or know someone who uses a wheelchair, you probably will be familiar with some of these things. Parking was really difficult at many birding locations. Gates, there's lots of different kinds of gates and not all of them are accessible. Bathrooms, there's a lot that goes into that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Steps and curbs. One small step, says Virginia, can be the difference between her being able to access a location independently versus needing to ask for help. And asking for help, I mean, it can be a solution, but it may not be a desired solution. Or there might not be anyone around, or you just might want to be able to go there by yourself. Virginia says that being unattended in nature is where the real joys come from. So one small step can be the difference. Railing height on bridges and safety barriers. Often railings are built at just the right height to completely obstruct the view of someone who is seated. Not helpful if you're looking for birds. Mud and sand, difficult to maneuver across or through. And she's in Texas, so maybe not relevant in Ontario, but cattle guards, cactus spines and cow patties. She will tell you that a cow patty on your shoes is one thing, but cow patties on your wheels and thus on your hands is a different story. And so all of these things individually and especially cumulatively create a lack of independence, which is really disempowering and not really exciting. So why did she keep going? Why did she keep birding if it was all so hard? Well, difficulty and uncertainty lead to empowerment and joy, she says. And I really like this photo. This is Virginia and her sister. They'd just come back from birding in the big thicket in East Texas. They were looking for a Swainson's warbler. They're super secretive and hard to find, and they found one. So they're really excited. While we've got this photo up though, that's Virginia's van. Yes, she drives. Many people who use wheelchairs can also drive. This van has a few modifications. All hand controls is how she steers and accelerates and brakes. That ramp though on the side, this is really important. There are accessible parking spaces and there are van accessible parking spaces, and van accessible parking spaces have that diagonal, it's called an access aisle. It's got those diagonal lines trying to stop people parking on it. And it's important because, as you can see with Virginia's van, there's a ramp that comes out the side of her van, out to the right. And if she can't deploy that ramp, she can't get in or out of a van, which means she can't go to the place where she's trying to go. She needs the ramp to come out, and she needs enough space to get onto the ramp as well. So those van accessible parking spaces have that aisle for a reason. And if you take nothing else away from this presentation today, please never park in that space. That's not a parking space. It's really important to remain clear. You can completely ruin someone's day by parking in it. It's not a motorbike parking space. If you ever see anyone parking in it, feel free to politely and encouragingly educate them on why that's not okay, no matter how quick they think they're going to rush into the shop and rush out again. That's not a parking space. Anyway, empowerment and joy, very awesome, you can get from birding. Lots of other joys, Virginia says, you can get from birding. You can learn things, you get friendships sometimes, you can travel, maybe not across the country. This is at the biggest week of American birding, big bird festival in Ohio. We'll be there, Virginia and myself will be there this year in May. Really looking forward to that bird festival. But travel was also going to a new park 20 minutes down the road that you've never been to, and that exploration that you get from those adventures. Physical health benefits, moving your body, you know, moving down a trail and breathing fresh air, and confidence because you navigated an obstacle you didn't think you could, and independence and the sense of community. Wow, there's so much good stuff that comes out of being part of a community, shared values and feeling supported and all that good stuff. Purpose, a thing to look forward to on the weekends. Oh, I can't wait to go birding on Saturday. And of course, the birds themselves. All of these things create empowerment for Virginia and absolutely outweigh all those difficulties. So Virginia says, no one can predict what an individual with an accessibility challenge can or cannot do. Another really important message, sometimes not even the person themselves can predict it until they've tried or tried a few times. As a healthcare provider, I have seen this myself in many different settings. So because of all these joys that Virginia had from birding, she wanted to make sure that other people with disabilities knew that they could get so much out of birding too, and that's how Birdability became a nonprofit, and that's the work that we're on about. So the three spokes of our work are addressing the physical accessibility of birding locations. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Welcoming an inclusive birding community. Of course, if the location is beautiful, but all the people using it aren't terribly nice, it might not be that encouraging to go back. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And the third part of our work is introducing people with access challenges to birding. Reaching out to all those groups that were on the slides before, to spinal cord support groups, to rehab hospitals, you know, encouraging people to come birding. And we hope that you'll be part of this work too. Throughout these slides, there's a lot more information that I just don't have time to talk about. So there's a website on the bottom. Every slide probably directs you to a different website. There's a lot of pages on our website. And if you'd like to learn more about any of these things, please go check out that. Our website is birdability.org. So here's a couple of access considerations that can make a birding location accessible or not. I talk about a birding location, not a trail, because it might include a trail, it might include a bird blind or an observation platform or a bird feeder station or even a car birding site. They're often really accessible to people with different access challenges. So that's why I'm talking broadly about birding locations. But parking is huge. If you drive, not everyone drives, but public transport therefore is quite important as well. But if you can't park, you can't visit the place. So we talked about parking in van accessible parking spaces. Finding out trail information ahead of time, really important for a lot of people. And this is not done well enough in most places. We want to see this kind of information on trail signs, the trailhead, and on places' websites. And we have a bit of a solution I will share with you shortly about this problem. But this sign, most of these photos, by the way, were taken at my favorite accessible trail, which is at Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky. This sign has really detailed information about the length, the surface, the width of the trail, which is important if you have a wide wheelchair and you want to be able to pass someone, the gradient or the slope, how steep it is, and the cross slope, which is how much of an angle you're on as you're traveling down that trail, which is also very important particularly if you're using some kind of mobility device. You don't want to be at risk of tipping over. This kind of information helps people know if the trail is just going to be completely unachievable for them, or maybe they could do a little bit, or if it's something they could definitely do. And the first time we visited this trail with my dodgy knee, the trail continues after the paved section to an unpaved bit. And because there was this equivalent information at that intersection, I wouldn't have bothered. I would have just turned around and assumed I couldn't do it, except that this information, the bottom, the second part of that sign actually, showed me that I probably could manage it. I tried and it was great. And we saw so many birds and we had a really fantastic day. And so this information can be so empowering for a lot of different people. Bathroom accessibility, there's a lot in that. Having accessible stalls and grab bars on the walls, and making sure the toilet paper dispenser is actually within reach, and that the sinks are low enough you can reach if you're seated in a wheelchair, and mirrors and hand dryers and soap dispensers. There's lots, door frame width and how heavy the door is. There's a lot that goes into contrast between fixtures and the walls. There's a lot that goes into bathroom accessibility, but portaloos. Portaloos are an interesting little topic. So many places have a regular size portaloo at the trailhead, which is great. But if you have an accessible size portaloo, everyone can use it. I would rather use an accessible size portaloo if given the choice, like here at Mammoth Cave, because it's bigger and it just doesn't get as hot and like stuffy inside, and it just sort of doesn't feel quite as gross. I don't need one, but I'd rather use one. And if you have an accessible size portaloo, everyone can use it. So that's a good little message there. If there's an alternative that everyone can use, please just go with that, because that just makes so much sense. Interpretive signs, there's a bunch that goes into this too. Good contrast between the text color and the background color. The height, so that someone who's seated can actually read it. We want to make sure the trail is paved right up to the sign so they can get close to it if they need to, not having the sign, a meter over there in the woods. Font size, the slope of the sign. This sign has a tactile component, which is really fun. A thing you can feel. That thing up on the top right is representative of tree bark, of the sycamore trees on this floodplain. A lot of people benefit from tactile signs. People who are blind or have low vision, yes, certainly. Little kids, people who have print disabilities, maybe people who this sign's only in English, but they could get something out of it because they can feel the tree bark. I just like feeling the tactile components because it's fun, it's engaging. The other thing this sign has, and something we really love seeing, is having an audio component of the sign, because not everyone can read printed text. Some places will have an iPod or something, or a wand, like in a museum or an art gallery, where you can borrow it from the visitor centre and plug in the number when you get to the sign and listen. Great, except when the visitor centre's closed because it's a pandemic, or because it's Saturday afternoon, or in this case, the visitor centre's like 7 kilometres from this trailhead. So not that helpful in that moment. Some interpretive signs have a QR code, really cool if you can scan it with your smartphone and listen, unless you don't have a smartphone, because maybe you can't afford one, or you're just traveling, or you've run out of battery, or there's no reception, like at Mammoth Cave, 0 reception throughout the entire park. This is the best. Next to this sign is a little column, and it has a solar panel and it has a button. And so it's always in operation, and you can press it and it will read to you the contents of the sign. Again, a lot of different people can benefit from this, not just people who are blind or have low vision. And that's the case with a lot of accessibility features, actually. Very often, you sort of think this thing you're going to do is going to help this group of people, but very often there's actually a lot of different people who benefit from that. I really enjoyed it because if you can see, there's some photos of plants on that sign, and they had their common names and their scientific names, and I didn't study botany, so I don't know how to say Latin stuff, but it told me, I don't remember now, but it spoke the scientific name aloud, and that was really cool. I got to learn something because of the audio component. Maintenance is really important. Just because you've built a wonderfully accessible location, trail, or observation platform like this one doesn't mean it will stay that way. Vegetation, too many leaves on the trail can create a slip hazard, or it can be too thick for a mobility device to pass through if there's stacks of leaves. Vegetation can grow in on the sides of trails, and even though the trail was a good width, now it's really not, which can make it hard to pass through. Or force people off the trail, which is not good for a few different reasons. Even tree trunks or branches that come across the trail at roughly someone's head height. If you are blind or have low vision, you may not see that branch, and knocking yourself out on a trail is not fun. And snow. If it helps, I live in Alabama. I'm from Australia. I lived in Boston for 2 years, so I appreciate snow. Snow is a thing. You know that, in Ontario. Of course, you can't plough after every single snowfall, and it would be ridiculous for a nature centre or a state park to expect people to be there Sunday morning at 7 a.m. to plough after a big fall on Saturday night. But what you can do is share the ploughing schedule, if there is one, on your website, so that people know, oh, well, they only plough Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, if relevant. It snowed on Saturday. I want to go on Sunday. There's no point driving 2 hours. I won't be able to access that location. So sharing information is really empowering for a lot of reasons. Railings, we talked about railing height. There are so many ways to build safety barriers and railings such that it doesn't make such a visual obstruction as what most of them do, which is they'll have a plank of wood on the top and turn it to create the biggest visual obstruction that it could for someone who's seated or short or a little kid. Of course, we need safety barriers. I'm not saying don't have safety barriers. We don't want people falling off cliffs. But this little viewing area at Mammoth Cave, I thought the beautiful new trail was broken. And I got closer and realized actually it's not broken. Those two sections are really thick plexiglass. Completely removed any kind of visual obstruction. Fabulous. Please, can we have more of those in the world? So good. It means that Virginia in her wheelchair can see everything that a standing person can. Little kids in strollers don't have to look through those like jail bars. I can have a rest of my dodgy knee on that wonderful bench. More benches. We need more benches in the world. And enjoy the view and see the whole view as well, because there isn't that visual obstruction there. Steps are other obstacles we mentioned. One small step can be a barrier. Some people can navigate a step. I can go up a step, but not if there's a lot of big ones and my knee's having a bad day. So just being aware of that, and roots, you know, big rocks, things like that makes a difference to how many people can access that location. And bird blinds or hides, bird hides, depending on what country you're in. Lots of different things that go into that as well. One of them is the height of windows. If there are many windows, we definitely want at least one, ideally more than one, to be at the height of a seated person, so that someone in a wheelchair or a scooter or sitting on their walking frame, or someone like me who could have brought like a portable folding chair and just have a seat at that low window. Fantastic, that's what we want. So because there's very few birding locations websites that explain all of that information in the detail that many people need, we have the Birdability map, which we do with National Audubon. It's really cool and anyone can contribute. So you just had sort of version 1 of the training. You don't really need training. It's pretty clear. I did my best to make it as clear as possible, but anyone can access the Birdability map and click on a yellow diamond and find out the information that someone has submitted about that birding location. I don't see terribly many diamonds in Canada, so please take this as a challenge, maybe a New Year's resolution, to add a couple of reasonably accessible birding locations to the Birdability map. It's pretty straightforward. So there's this printable checklist. You're not asked to make any judgment calls, except that we only want reasonably accessible birding locations. That's quantified on our website. Flat, concrete or asphalt or boardwalk, not terribly long, that sort of stuff helps us know if it's reasonably accessible. Once you've figured out if a place is reasonably accessible, you're just asked to tell us what is or isn't there. You don't need to say, oh, a wheelchair user couldn't manage it, because there are lots of kinds of wheelchair users and you don't know all of them. And so you don't have to make those calls for someone else. They can make that call for themselves. You just have to tell us what's there so that people can make that decision. So it's comprehensive, but it's not difficult, this site review checklist. And then it populates the Vertability map, and anyone can click on a yellow diamond and see that information to know. If you're involved at a nature centre or something, or you're holding outings at a place, you can also link directly from one of these site reviews to your website, so people can find out that information. And we hope this is going to be, or we know in fact already, that this is a really valuable resource to a lot of people, and the more people who contribute to it, the more valuable it will be. So a change of topic here. I am on a bit of a mission to redefine birding as the act of enjoying wild birds. I'm from Australia, where we talk about bird watching. And I remember asking my parents, who have been birding for a very long time, why they didn't call themselves birders. And they said, well, birding's very American and that's fine, but we're not American. But not everyone watches birds. I could talk about this all day. I wrote an article for Audubon magazine. If you want to hear more of my opinion on this or share it with more people, I can dig out, I'll do that afterwards. I'll dig out the link and share it in the chat. But if we all were just birders, there's no hierarchy about who's a real birder and who's just a bird watcher. If we're all just birders, and birding is the act of enjoying wild birds, you don't have to see them to enjoy them, you can hear them. You don't have to move down a trail, you can do it from your kitchen window. You don't need binoculars to enjoy wild birds. They're just a tool, they're helpful, but they're not necessary. You don't even need to know what the birds are called to enjoy them. We place a lot of emphasis on identification, but it's actually not necessary just to enjoy the bird. So if you think this rings true for you and helps you identify as a birder, if that's something important to you, I hope you'll absorb this definition and start using it, because language is always evolving, and the people using the language are the ones who get to direct it. So this is my personal mission, but I think it also helps make birding a lot more welcoming and inclusive for a lot of different people who may not have otherwise felt like they could call themselves birders. So, and this is all up to you, like any of these identifier terms, everyone has their own personal preference, and that's fine. You're allowed to identify however you like. But I'm going to share some ideas with you about language if it helps you with being more inclusive and welcoming. So I'm no longer using bird watcher, I talk about birders. And so we also don't talk about bird walks. Not everybody walks. We talk about bird outings or field trips, which might just make the difference between someone who's maybe newly injured and using a wheelchair, for example, feeling like they can come, even though they can't actually walk. Bird outing, it's really easy. And as an Australian living in the US, there's lots of word swaps I've had to make just to make sure that I'm more clearly understood. And I'll tell you, it's really annoying the first like 2 or 3 times to remember it, and then you just do it, and it's really not that hard. And if that helps more people feel more welcome and included in this wonderful hobby, I think that's a great thing. However, handicapped and impaired are seen by a lot of people in the disability community as really disempowering and out of date. And so it's totally okay to say someone has a disability or is disabled. It's not rude because it's not offensive, because there's nothing wrong with that. It's just how it is. Thinking that you need to use another word than disabled sort of indicates you think there's something wrong with being disabled, and there isn't. So it's totally okay to say someone has a disability. But we don't really want to say normal. Normal, what's normal? Probably in this context, what you mean is they're able-bodied or non-disabled, or they're sighted, or they're hearing, or they're neurotypical. That's probably what you mean in this kind of conversation. So trying to avoid normal, whatever that is, when I'm talking about this sort of stuff. We also want to avoid wheelchair bound. No one usually is tied against their will to a wheelchair. It's really disempowering. It implies that someone is nothing without their wheelchair, when in fact wheelchairs are freedom machines. They allow people to do so much that they couldn't do without a wheelchair. So you should say that they're a wheelchair user. And because we're losing impaired, vision impaired is becoming more and more out of date as well. And so we talk about someone who is blind or has low vision. Low vision seems really vague in a like general English sort of way, but actually my background as an occupational therapist is in blindness and low vision services, and low vision is a technical term. It's sort of the point at which an eye condition has made it such that glasses no longer help. That's basically the point, that someone has low vision, but still functional vision, some amount of functional vision. Anyway, so we're trying to avoid wheelchair bound and vision impaired. It's not enough to just think you're being inclusive. You have to be intentionally inclusive. Now, this often takes more money. It often takes more time and energy. Sometimes it takes more money. But it's the difference between, putting a Facebook invitation out to a barbecue you're having next weekend at your house, saying, hey, everyone's invited. I might be like, yeah, cool, okay, I don't know, might go. But if someone sends that to me and says, hey, Freya, I really want you to come. I really want you to come to this barbecue. Oh, you want me there? Oh, I'd love to come. Thanks. I'll absolutely be there. That's being intentional. And that's a really important thing if you're trying to do this work. There's a lot more information about this on our website, and I actually wrote another article for Auto On magazine about this that just got published a couple of weeks ago. So I'll dig that out for the chat as well. But there's lots of different ways that individual birders, that bird outing leaders, and that organisations can be more intentional about being inclusive. So you can do things like including detailed information in your outing event descriptions. More information about, like I said, all of this stuff is on our website, but you need the day, the date, the time, and the meeting place. You want to specifically state that this is an accessible and inclusive bird outing. And if beginners are welcome, or small children, parents want to come birding too. Detailed information about the physical accessibility of that location. We sort of talked about that before. And link to the Birdability map site review if it's an online description, but include key details in the description as well. Tell people if there's loaner equipment available, if there's binoculars, or if there's a mount for a scope for someone's wheelchair, what kind of equipment it is that's available, and how many items there are. By the way, wheelchair mounted scope, that's a thing. We have a page on our website about adaptive birding equipment. If you want some ideas about loaner equipment that you might, your bird club or nature centre might be able to have on hand for people. And including the contact information for leaders and their experience holding these kinds of outings, or their own access challenge if they have one, and inviting people to connect with them if they have questions. Really, really helpful for a lot of folks who might not know that a lot of people are worried about being a burden. And so inviting people to connect with the leader ahead of time. Hey, will I be able to manage this? Like, do you know if there's more than just one bathroom? Whatever question they have, feels really welcoming. So bird outing leaders, things you can do: smile and say hello to other birders. The saying hello bit's in there on purpose, because if someone is blind or has low vision, they may not realize that you're smiling at them and trying to be nice. So saying hello out loud is important. You can include a welcome statement at the beginning of all bird outings, including sharing your own pronouns, mine is she, her, hers, which invites other people to do the same if they are non-binary or transgender. They may feel more welcome because you are showing some awareness of pronouns that might be different. Someone's pronouns might be different to how other people think their pronouns are based on their appearance. Behavioral expectations, things like nobody knows everything about birds. I don't know everything about birds. So if you have any questions, please ask. And if you can't get to me, anyone around you will be happy to help. Sort of subtly hinting that people here are going to be helpful and collaborative and friendly with each other. You might also include a land acknowledgement in the welcome statement. Don't single someone out because of a difference unless it is relevant. Don't make a big fuss. Oh, guys, look, we've got someone here who's using crutches. Yeah, that's really awkward. Everyone who's cited can probably see that. That person's now feeling probably pretty weird about that. But if there's stairs coming up, maybe you could go up to that person, ideally one-on-one, and like, hey, I see you using crutches. You're allowed to name it. They know they're using crutches. But just, you know, respectfully up the back of the group or something. Hey, look, there's stairs coming up. I see you using crutches. Let me know if you need any help with the stairs or if you want some ideas about game planning those stairs, because we can figure it out. That's definitely appreciated. Offer help, but be prepared to graciously accept no. Not everyone wants help. And if you get all like hooked up about it when they say no, like that's not very welcoming or inclusive. Don't be all like, oh, well, so sorry, I was just trying to be nice. That's weird. Don't do that. Just be like, no worries. Well, let me know if you would like help later on or anything. I'll be around. Just be cool. Just be cool. If they do want help, don't assume you know what help they need, because everyone's different. Everyone will have different preferences. Everyone's wheelchair works differently. Just the next question is, cool, what would you like me to do? And let them guide you, because they are the expert on what they need. And believe someone if they identify a bird. Not everyone will get it right, sure, but don't assume they've got it wrong. That's so discouraging. It's happened to me over and over again, probably because I have a different accent. That doesn't mean I know nothing about North American birds, though. This happens to lots of different groups of people. The way that you can do it that's so much better is this attitude of trust but verify. Assume they have it right, but then go check. Don't assume they have it wrong from the start. Instead of saying, oh, you think you've got an American redstart over there? I don't think so. You can go up to them like, oh, cool, an American redstart? That's awesome. Let's see. And if it's not, you can encouragingly explain why it's a different bird. Don't just dismiss someone. It's no fun. Zero fun. And be actively anti-racist. This is really big. And of course, if Birdability was only working to make birding more inclusive and accessible for white, straight, cisgender, disabled birders, we wouldn't be doing our job. There's lots of birders who are BIPOC or LGBTQIA+, or have any other number of identities. And so there's a difference between thinking that you're not racist and being actively anti-racist, going out of your way to make sure that you are working on any racial biases you might hold just because of the society you grew up in or whatever, and trying to make sure that people around you are not saying things that could be, you know, racial microaggressions or anything like that. That's a whole nother huge conversation, but please look up anti-racism if you're white, particularly if you're white or white passing, and see if there's something there for you, because this is really important. Don't force someone to opt out. Go out of your way to allow them to opt in. There's lots of different ways that that this can be done, and it feels really good when you're doing your best to make sure that people can come if they would like. In terms of an organizational level, or this could be a bird club or any kind of large gathering of people, there's things you can do to help people, invite people to opt in. You can create an inclusion and diversity statement, post it on your website, make it really accessible, and hold your employees or volunteers and the whole organization accountable for the actions you're going to take to help inclusion and diversity. You can hold accessible bird outings as part of your regular programming. Don't just do it once, that's not enough. Keep doing it every month. We want it every month. And include that accessibility information in your write-up. and keep on reaching out to the local disability community and inviting them to come along to your accessible bird outings. I promise you, you'll find birds on accessible trails. I promise. Include image descriptions for social media posts. Many people who are blind or have low vision and people with a lot of other different access needs use screen reader software, which reads aloud the text on the screen, but it can't read a photo or a graphic because it's a photo or a graphic, unless you have an image description or alternative text, which is you writing out what that image is of so that someone can access that information. Because if you don't have that, you're just forcing screen reader users to opt out of whatever social media you're posting or the images on your website. Include closed captions for all webinars and meetings, even if no one has asked for them. It's really exhausting having to advocate for your needs all the time. And closed captions, especially on Zoom, really easy. You just turn them on. And if no one's asked for them, it doesn't matter because someone might have needed them and you just had them there. And that just feels so good. They didn't have to advocate for their needs. And especially if someone asks for closed captions, please don't have a debate with them about whether their need is valid. This happens really a lot and it's really, really awful. Don't do that. Just if someone asks for an accommodation, just do your best to provide it. Don't enter into a discussion about why they need it. That's actually not your business. And they wouldn't ask for it if they didn't need it. So we love closed captions on Zoom meetings, webinars, on YouTube, videos, on Instagram, Reels, whatever. Closed captions all the way. Yes, people who are deaf or hard of hearing need them. Some people who have auditory processing disorders need them. People who maybe have turned off the audio because they're watching your webinar on the train or something, or in bed when they should be asleep, or something like that. Closed captions benefit a lot of different people, so we definitely want them. And remove financial barriers to access whenever possible. It's not always possible, totally, but sometimes you can get a sponsorship or a grant or a donor will support that one program you're doing, or you can have a pay what you can method or a suggested donation rather than a specific hard cost. Can really be helpful for a lot of different people, not just people with disabilities and other health concerns. And provide honorariums for speakers or consultants. This is really important. Expecting anyone, but particularly people from historically marginalised communities like people who are BIPOC or LGBTQIA+ or disabled, to spend their time creating a presentation for you and giving it, that's hours of their time, their free time, often expending some emotional labour in the process. Expecting them to do that for free isn't really cool. For your own personal education or entertainment, that's not great. Honorariums show that you respect their time and what they have to contribute. Really makes a big difference to a lot of people saying yes or no to these invitations. And consultants, this might be, say you work at a nature centre and you want to invite people from the disability community to come check out the trail that you've just had built that's accessible, or you hope it is, and you want their people who actually will use it to give you some really solid feedback on what else you can do to make it more accessible. That's such a good thing to do, but you really need to provide an honorarium to thank them for their time. At least, I don't know, at least something like $50 to cover their gas. Again, it's their free time, really important. And this is all about equity and doing good stuff. Okay, we're nearly there. Questions coming up, so please hit me up with questions if you have any. But we have quite a lot of resources for birders with disabilities and other health concerns on our website. I definitely invite you to check out birdability.org. The Birdability map we already talked about, an adaptive birding equipment webpage. If you have any adaptive birding equipment, I'd love to hear about it so we can add it to that webpage and make this resource more helpful for more people. We have a Birdability Birders Facebook group. You're welcome to jump in there and get chatting with other birders with disabilities who might have ideas that might be helpful to you if you have a question or something like that. The Vertability Blog, I love using it to amplify experiences of birders with access challenges. There's some really cool posts up there, lots to learn, both for non-disabled birders learning how to be a better ally, and for birders with access challenges. You might get some ideas from other people with similar access needs up there. In virtual programs, I'm currently running a monthly series with the American Bird Conservancy, interviewing a birder with a disability, like one-on-one, about birding with their disability. The next one's actually tomorrow night, but all the other ones have been recorded. They're all up there. Tomorrow I'm going to be interviewing Day Scott, who is a black birder from Wyoming who has a traumatic brain injury, and she's a photographer as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about bird photography and having a traumatic brain injury. So please check out our virtual programs, and there's lots of other stuff up on our website, lots of guidance documents for organisations and birders wanting to help hold accessible outings and things like that. So please check out our website. And yeah, well, birding, we think that birding is for everybody and everybody. My email address is info@birdability.org. I am the only person behind the scenes staff-wise at Vertability, so please bear with me if it takes me a minute to email you back. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Birdability. And because we are a nonprofit, donations are really important for us to keep doing this work. And so if you found this of any value, if you'd like to donate, I'll stick that donation link in the chat as well. It's really appreciated, big or small. Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Freya. You are so amazing, and I just really appreciate your enthusiasm and all of the really important messages and conversation that you had today. I'm just very thankful. So thank you for sharing everything with you. We'll give a couple minutes for anybody that has any questions, just to comment them in the chat bar or on Facebook. We do have one question coming up, but I do want to just mention, if you are living in Mississauga area and you know of Riverwood, we do have an enabling garden coordinator that does all accessible programming. So it's therapeutic horticultural program. So we actually have accessible garden beds and A-frames and a sensory path as well. Something that I really love though is the audio aspect, which is something we don't have part of our sensory trail. So definitely something to look into, absolutely. Another thing I just changed, Freya, because of you. I'm actually running beginner birding programs, which are just an inclusive program that anybody can come out to, because I know when I started birding, I felt very much that I couldn't ask questions when I was in groups, and I felt very uncomfortable approaching and learning a lot of times about birds, which I don't know why it's like that. So we do have a beginner birding program, and the old name was beginner bird watching. And now, since your presentation, I have just sparked up an email to say, we need to change this right now. So
that's awesome.
Thank you very much for all of your insight. I've been writing so many notes down, and I'm glad that this is recorded as well, so that we can make some changes on an organization level as well. The first thing that kind of came up is, does the Birdability map only include accessible accessible sites?
Yeah, so the Birdability map is built on a GIS story map platform, which, if that doesn't mean anything to you, that's totally fine. If it does, that explains possibly why there aren't any filters, and because we can't currently filter, like people can't search and then add filters, and because we can't do that, we don't really want all these like epic mountains with great birding opportunities on the Birdability map, because people won't be able to kind of get them out of the way when they're trying to find places near them that they could go birding at. So that's why we only really want reasonably accessible birding locations pinned up there. I'll stick the link in the chat, which has a little bit more like quantifying information about what a reasonably accessible birding location is. But yeah, so only that's all we want on the Birdability map at this point. But yeah, thank you. Awesome. Great question.
Okay, another one that came in, especially appreciated the comments regarding use of accessibility terminology. Absolutely. And definitely something, even myself, I'm going to learn more about. There's always learning to be done. I even looked on our website, we have something called Sunset Stroll, which we can definitely rename that. We don't have to have those 2 S's to make it a catchy kind of title. We definitely want to be more inclusive in terms of terminology.
I mean, it's an interesting discussion. Virginia, who cannot walk, she talks about going on bird walks. So like it's
right.
A lot of people aren't going to be like mortally offended if you say bird walk or sunset stroll,
right.
because people just use the language that everyone else uses, or that, you know, it's still the same idea, even if you're not physically walking. But my sort of aim with that is just to get us thinking about if there are ways that, like on an organizational level, you can swap out language that it just might make a couple more people feel like they can come along. Like that just seems like a win to me. Like bird walk or bird watching, like not everyone watches them. So most people bird by ear to some extent, even if they don't know how to identify birds by call, there's a noise over there, let me look and see what it is. Like that's still birding by ear. So yeah, I'm glad that was helpful. There's I'm just sticking it in the chat. There's this other page on our website about inclusive language use, if anyone's more interested in delving into that a little more.
A question came in from Anne's asking, are there birding sessions for kids with disabilities? And I wonder if you could let us know where you're located, because I'm sure Freya has some organizations that she could refer to, but also if you are near Mississauga. Once again, we have the Enabling Garden program at Riverwood, which is run by Carrie Furneaux. And I did put that link in the chat bar, and she is happy to do any kind of programs for people with disabilities too. So
Virginia, our founder, is in Texas. I'm in Alabama right now, although my husband's in the Army, so we'll move at some point. We're only 2, and we've only been going for a year at this as a nonprofit. Our kind of approach has been to try and encourage and support organizations like Riverwood Conservancy and in the US, Audubon chapters and bird clubs to hold their own accessible birding programs. Because if we spend our time trying to empower groups who are already in the community and who are already running these things, you know, we could have 100 times the impact than if we 2 people just held a few outings here and there ourselves. So I don't currently hold any birding sessions for kids with disabilities, but it would be a wonderful thing. There's so much scope in that, and we really want to see that happening. Virginia's really excited about getting accessible birding opportunities in kids disabled camps happening. So yeah, if you're interested in that, I bet there's places in your community that you can connect to start that conversation and get that rolling. And if I can be any support in that, I would love to be. Like, send me an email, let me know if there's stuff on our website that's helpful for that. That's why I spend time creating those resources. So I encourage you to advocate or make it happen yourself. It's you don't have to be experts on birds to hold outings. You don't. You can just go out and enjoy them with other people, and that counts. So yeah, let me know if you'd like some assistance with that. But yeah, I don't have anything specific to kind of direct you to.
Thank you, Freya. Yeah, I'm sure we always have ways to improve our organization. I'm currently doing community programs, but we do have 2 other teachers that work for kindergartens to grade 12. And we have completely accessible bird feeders as well. And we fill those up every other day at Riverwood. And so there's always accessible ways to get to these bird feeders and watch the birds as well. And they're just, the program team is just wonderful at making accessible programs. So those 2 programs are called Education Naturally and Leads. So Leads is the high school and Education Naturally is K to 8. And they always offer programs for anybody. So that's wonderful. But Freya, absolutely, I will reach out to you with all of this information. There's a lot going on. I have so many notes, but thank you very much. I have one more question coming in from Facebook. Have you noticed a rise in the interest in birding over the past few years? Have you seen a similar trend or more clubs and organizations making strides to become more accessible?
Yes to both. So we know that a lot more people are engaging with birds since the pandemic began. Things like the Merlin Bird Id App, which is created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Really awesome. It's free. It's really cool. There's a new sound ID feature, by the way, where you can like let it listen to what you're listening to, and it'll suggest the birds that might be making that call, which is really cool. I'm a big fan of this app. The Cornell Lab reported like a huge increase in the number of downloads of that app in the first like 4 or 6 months of the pandemic. The National Audubon in the US had a whole lot more people sign up as members. There's all these different little pieces of data that showed us, as well as all these anecdotes. I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, I didn't really care about birds that much until the last year and a half when I really started tuning into what was in my backyard because I was stuck at home all the time. So definitely there's a lot more people engaging with birds in the last 2 years. There's also been a lot of awareness and a lot of push from many different organizations in this inclusion, diversity, equity and access sphere. A lot of that was pushed into the world by Black Birders Week, which was this phenomenal online event that happened. The first one happened in late May, early June 2020. I know it'll be happening again this year. Check it out. It's really cool. A lot of awareness about Black birders. Yes, there are Black birders and there's lots of them, and they experience a lot of racism a lot of the time, and what can white birders do to help, and really cool stuff. National Audubon do a Let's Go Birding Together. It's an initiative in June, which is Pride Month. That's their little, well, that's not very good, sorry. It's a little painted bunting with a rainbow pride flag for a wing is the logo. Sorry, my lighting's not very good, but and then there's us, and a lot of organizations there's local clubs that have sprung up, created just for trans birders or BIPOC birders. And there's lots of stuff going on in that sphere. It's really, really cool. And if you want to know a bit more about this, I know for sure there's more in Canada that I don't know about, but I've got another link here. I call it a good idea for birding. Idea is inclusion, diversity, equity and access. The access is important. And so there's lots of different groups around working in that. The Feminist Bird Club is another huge one. I know there's a chapter in Toronto. They're a big inspiration of mine. They've been going like for 5 years, much longer than I have. So yeah, lots and lots, really cool. Lots of people you can support and ways to get involved in this.
Thank you so much, Freya. This has been a really wonderful presentation, and I think we can all take away a lot from it. So thank you so much for coming out. I know you are crazy busy right now, so I appreciate your time. I wonder, before we say goodbye, if you have any final notes for us.
Only that I did see in the chat. It's too hard for me to look in the chat very effectively during a presentation, but I did see that someone asked about closed captions. And that I appreciated the fact that there were closed captions on Facebook, but that could be a thing to look at, is closed captions in Zoom webinars, and advertising that they'll be available when in the description of the event. You just say closed captions will be available, and that's something that sometimes I think Zoom has sorted this out, but a year ago that was an additional cost. You had to get like a third-party captioning service. But if the organization really wants to do this work, like that's just part of the programming budget, and so I'm glad that there was a solution today for this person, but that'd be a great thing to go forwards on.
Yes, and I also have that down on my notes too. I have a whole bunch of notes. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you, and I hope we can work again together in the future, Freya. And if you or Virginia are ever in Ontario, let us know. We'd be happy to go birding with you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you everyone for joining us again, and we will see you in the next program. Goodbye, everyone.